100,000 years ago, the world was a vastly different place. Ice sheets stretched across continents, rivers carved paths through untamed landscapes, and forests and grasslands teemed with life both familiar and strange. Humans were not yet the dominant species, but they were beginning to leave their mark, navigating a world full of challenges, dangers, and opportunities. Predators roamed freely, megafauna grazed across the plains, and the climate shifted unpredictably, demanding adaptation at every turn. Early humans learned to hunt, gather, and craft tools, to read the rhythms of nature, and to communicate through signs, sounds, and gestures. They discovered fire, sought shelter, and formed the first social bonds that would define cooperation and survival. Through observation, ingenuity, and persistence, they adapted to harsh environments, creating a legacy of resilience that would echo through generations. The story of this ancient world reveals not only the struggles of survival but the origins of culture, innovation, and human connection, a journey that set the stage for everything that was to come. Sorry for the interruption. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. 100,000 years ago, the Earth looked very different from the world we know today. Vast glaciers stretched across the northern continents, their icy fingers carving mountains and valleys, shaping the land in ways that would take millennia to fully reveal. Between these frozen expanses lay forests thick with towering trees, their roots clutching at the soil, sheltering countless creatures beneath their canopies. Savannas stretched endlessly under the sun, golden grasses rippling in the wind, dotted with the shapes of roaming herds. Rivers wound like silver ribbons across the land, carrying life wherever they flowed, and lakes reflected the sky in still, quiet pools. This was a world in motion, a world alive with the pulse of survival, where every season brought new challenges and opportunities. Humans were present, though not yet the masters of the earth. Their footprints were light on the landscape, easily lost among the tracks of mammoths, giant deer, and predators that prowled the night. Small groups of early Homo sapiens moved carefully, learning the rhythms of the land, observing the habits of the animals they followed, and seeking shelter wherever the terrain offered protection. Each discovery, each moment of ingenuity, was a step in a journey that would stretch across continents and generations. Humans were not alone. Neanderthals occupied regions to the north and west, sharing the forests and river valleys, while Denisovans lingered in the mountains and plateaus of Asia. Encounters were rare, fleeting, and mysterious, leaving behind only subtle traces of interaction that would puzzle the future. The climate was harsh, yet it was also a teacher. Ice and snow forced adaptation, while the warmth of the sun coaxed life into the forests and grasslands. Animals migrated, rivers swelled and receded, and humans had to move with them or risk starvation. The landscape was both generous and unforgiving. Food was never guaranteed, and safety was never permanent, but the intelligence and curiosity of early humans allowed them to navigate this precarious world. Fire became a companion, providing warmth and protection, while stone tools offered a means to hunt, gather, and prepare food in ways that increased their chances of survival. Even at this early stage, humans were beginning to leave their mark. Charred remnants of fire, broken stone tools, and scattered shelters spoke of ingenuity and resilience. Though they were small players in a vast ecosystem, the choices they made, the paths they took, and the lives they led would ripple forward across time. This was the Earth as it existed 100,000 years ago, a world of glaciers, forests and savannas, of predators and prey, of rivers and lakes, and of humans taking their first tentative steps into a story that was only just beginning. 100,000 years ago, much of the northern hemisphere was dominated by immense ice sheets, their frozen surfaces stretching as far as the eye could see. These were not mere patches of snow or seasonal frost, but colossal expanses of ice, some miles thick, pressing down on the land with silent, relentless force. Mountains were swallowed beneath their weight, valleys were carved into deep channels, and coastlines were reshaped by the slow, inexorable movement of glaciers. The climate surrounding these ice sheets was harsh and unpredictable. Winds swept across the frozen plains with piercing cold, storms could arrive without warning, and temperatures dropped to extremes that would challenge the hardiest of creatures. The presence of these glaciers dictated where life could thrive. Forests clung to the edges of ice, creating narrow corridors of survival where trees offered shelter to small mammals, birds, and humans alike. Savannas, free from ice, were dotted with roaming herds, yet even there, the cold winds from the north made the seasons severe. Rivers carried meltwater from the ice sheets, swelling in spring and receding in summer, shaping the land and providing critical sources of water. Animals adapted to this frozen world in remarkable ways. Woolly mammoths grew thick coats of fur, their curved tusks helping them dig through snow to reach grass beneath. Saber-toothed cats prowled cautiously, stalking prey weakened by the cold or trapped by the ice. Humans, too, adapted, developing clothing from animal hides, learning to build shelters that could withstand snow and wind, and devising strategies to hunt and gather in a world where survival depended on careful planning and knowledge of the land. The ice sheets were both barrier and opportunity. They blocked migration in some directions while exposing new land bridges in others, connecting continents and allowing species, including humans, to move into territories that had once been inaccessible. The sheer scale of the ice inspired awe and fear, shaping myths, stories, and the imagination of early humans. Life near the glaciers required constant vigilance. The landscape was in motion, with glaciers advancing and retreating, grinding stone and soil into new forms, creating lakes and rivers, and sometimes swallowing entire habitats under ice. Yet despite the challenges, life endured. Each species, from the smallest rodent to the largest predator, developed strategies to persist. Humans observed, learned, and adapted, finding ways to use the ice and snow to their advantage. They discovered routes for migration, hunting grounds teeming with prey, and materials for tools and shelter. The ice sheets, vast and unyielding, shaped the world and the lives within it, defining the patterns of survival and evolution. This frozen frontier was a crucible, testing resilience, intelligence, and determination, and the lessons learned here would echo forward as humans spread across continents and faced new environments in the millennia to come. 100,000 years ago, the world was constantly in motion, not just in the winds and the storms, but in the very shape of the land itself. Glacial periods locked vast amounts of water in ice sheets, lowering sea levels dramatically and revealing stretches of land that today lie hidden beneath the oceans. These newly exposed lands acted as bridges between continents, pathways that allowed animals, plants, and humans to migrate into regions that had previously been isolated. The world was connected in ways that seem almost unimaginable now, and life moved across these bridges with a sense of purpose, driven by survival, curiosity, and the search for resources. These land bridges were vital corridors. Between Asia and North America, the Bering Land Bridge stretched across what is now the Bering Strait, creating a frozen expanse where herds of mammoths, bison, and horses could roam freely. Humans followed them, learning to track, hunt, and settle in these new territories. Similar pathways appeared in Europe and Africa, linking islands to mainlands, and allowing species to expand their ranges. The exposure of shallow seas and coastal plains transformed ecosystems. Areas once submerged became fertile grounds for grazing animals, while humans discovered rich fishing grounds and sources of fresh water. The rhythm of the tides and the retreat of the ice dictated the availability of these resources, forcing early humans to observe, adapt, and plan. As ice advanced and retreated, shorelines shifted, sometimes dramatically. Entire coastlines disappeared beneath rising waters when glaciers melted, while other areas emerged from the sea, reshaping habitats and forcing migrations. This constant fluctuation created a dynamic environment where no species could remain static. Humans moved with the land, following rivers, tracking herds, and settling where survival seemed most certain. The changes also brought challenges. Areas that had been safe became dangerous as floods, storms, and shifting soils altered familiar landscapes. But with risk came opportunity. Humans learned to navigate, to read the signs of the land and water, and to understand that adaptation was the key to persistence. The exposure of land bridges not only allowed the spread of species but also facilitated cultural and genetic exchange. Early humans encountering new environments faced different climates, predators, and foods, pushing innovation in tools, clothing, and shelter. Over time, these migrations laid the foundation for the global dispersal of humans. Every bridge crossed, every coastline followed, and every plain settled contributed to a pattern of movement and survival that would echo for tens of thousands of years. The Earth, shifting beneath the weight of ice and water, was a living map, constantly redrawn by the forces of nature, and those who learned its patterns were the ones who endured, leaving traces that we can still uncover today. 100,000 years ago, the world was shared by multiple human species, each carving out a place in a challenging and often unforgiving environment. Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, were beginning to establish themselves, moving across Africa and venturing into new territories. At the same time, Neanderthals inhabited the forests and valleys of Europe and Western Asia, while Denisovans lingered in the mountains and plateaus of Asia, their presence known mostly through fragments of bone and teeth. Each species faced the same basic challenges: finding food, avoiding predators, enduring harsh climates, and raising the next generation in a world that was never gentle. Homo sapiens were resourceful and adaptable, learning to read the landscape and use it to their advantage. They followed herds of animals across the savanna, understanding their movements and anticipating seasonal patterns. Rivers and lakes provided water, fish, and fertile areas for gathering edible plants. They discovered the importance of fire, using it for warmth, protection, and cooking, which made food easier to digest and more nutritious. Clothing made from hides and furs shielded them from cold winds and icy nights, while shelters constructed from branches, stone, and bone offered refuge from storms and predators. These early humans were hunters, gatherers, and keen observers, relying on intelligence, cooperation, and ingenuity to survive. Neanderthals, meanwhile, were masterful in their own right. Stockier and stronger than Homo sapiens, they were well suited to cold climates. They hunted large game, used stone tools with remarkable skill, and may have created symbolic objects and early forms of art. Evidence suggests that they cared for their injured and buried their dead, hinting at social structures and awareness beyond mere survival. Denisovans are less well known, their existence glimpsed only through DNA and sparse fossils. Yet they too contributed to the genetic and cultural tapestry of early humans, interbreeding with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and passing on traits that persist in some populations today. Migration was a defining feature of this era. Humans moved in response to climate, following resources and exploring new landscapes. This movement required knowledge of terrain, the ability to navigate, and cooperation within small groups. Communication, gestures, and perhaps early language allowed coordination and teaching, ensuring that survival skills were passed from one generation to the next. Life was dangerous, unpredictable, and often short, yet these early humans were resilient. They adapted to deserts, forests, mountains, and icy plains. Each step they took, each tool they made, and each fire they kindled reflected intelligence and determination. They were not dominant, but they were persistent, learning from the land, the animals, and each other. The emergence of Homo sapiens alongside Neanderthals and Denisovans marks a critical chapter in the human story, a time when survival, adaptation, and ingenuity laid the foundations for the species that would eventually spread across every corner of the Earth. 100,000 years ago, the Earth was a world of giants. In the forests, plains, and tundra, megafauna roamed in astonishing diversity, shaping ecosystems and influencing the lives of the humans who shared their world. Woolly mammoths moved across the northern plains in enormous herds, their thick fur and massive tusks adapted to the icy winds and deep snow. These creatures fed on grasses and shrubs, their constant grazing shaping the land and creating pathways that other animals, and humans, would follow. Each mammoth was a moving island of strength and endurance, a reminder of the power and resilience that life could achieve in a harsh climate. Giant ground sloths inhabited forests and open woodlands, their long claws and massive bodies allowing them to reach high branches and feed on tough vegetation. These slow-moving giants were formidable yet vulnerable, their size a deterrent to predators but also a challenge for early humans who sought to hunt them. Saber-toothed cats prowled the shadows, their elongated canine teeth capable of delivering lethal strikes to the largest herbivores. They were ambush predators, relying on stealth and power, and their presence reminded all who lived in the same world that survival required vigilance, intelligence, and respect for the natural order. Humans observed these creatures with a mixture of awe and necessity. Hunting a mammoth or a sloth demanded strategy, cooperation, and patience. Early humans used tools, fire, and clever tactics to bring down large prey, often working together in groups to overcome the strength of these giants. But they also learned from them, following migration patterns, studying feeding habits, and understanding how the movements of herds influence the availability of other resources. Every footprint, every broken branch, and every remnant of dung provided information about the habits of these massive animals. The presence of megafauna also influenced the landscapes themselves. Mammoths and bison trampled and grazed the land, spreading seeds and shaping plant communities. Predators controlled herbivore populations, creating a balance that allowed diverse ecosystems to flourish. Humans, though small in size, began to interact with this balance, becoming an active part of these dynamic systems. Their decisions where to hunt, when to migrate, and how to store food were influenced by the rhythms of the megafauna around them. Life in this era was defined by scale. The giants of the earth dominated the imagination as much as the land itself, commanding respect, fear, and fascination. Humans learned to coexist, to adapt, and to survive alongside them. These megafauna were not simply animals. They were architects of the environment, shaping the earth and influencing the trajectory of human evolution. Observing and interacting with these enormous creatures taught early humans lessons about strategy, cooperation, and the fragility and resilience of life, lessons that would echo across generations as humans continued to spread across continents and face new challenges in a world of giants. 100,000 years ago, the Earth was a mosaic of biomes, each offering unique challenges and opportunities for the creatures that inhabited them. Dense forests stretched across vast regions, their thick canopies filtering sunlight into a patchwork of shadows on the forest floor. These forests were alive with movement, filled with birds, small mammals, and insects, each playing a role in the intricate web of life. Trees grew tall and ancient, their roots intertwining with the soil, creating hidden networks of shelter and protection. Early humans learned to move quietly through these forests, observing the patterns of animals, listening for the rustle of leaves, and interpreting the subtle signs that indicated the presence of food or danger. In contrast, the open grasslands stretched endlessly under the sun, golden waves of grass rippling in the wind. Herds of herbivores, from antelopes to mammoths, moved across these plains in search of fresh grazing, their migrations shaping the land with every step. Predators, large and small, followed these herds, using strategy and patience to secure a meal. The grasslands demanded a different set of skills from humans, who needed to track animals over long distances, understand the seasonal rhythms of the landscape, and work together to hunt effectively. Visibility in the grasslands allowed early humans to spot threats from afar, but it also exposed them to danger, requiring constant vigilance and awareness of the environment. Humans adapted to both environments, learning to exploit the resources that each biome offered. Forests provided fruits, nuts, and roots, as well as wood for tools, fire, and shelters. The dense cover offered protection from predators and harsh weather, allowing small groups to establish temporary camps and observe the movements of larger animals. Grasslands, on the other hand, were rich in game and allowed humans to follow herds over great distances, developing hunting strategies that required cooperation, communication, and careful planning. The knowledge of these landscapes was passed from one generation to the next, forming the foundation of survival skills that would endure for tens of thousands of years. The contrast between forests and grasslands also influenced the social and cultural development of early humans. Forests encouraged quiet observation, patience, and adaptability, while grasslands demanded boldness, mobility, and coordination. By learning to navigate both, humans became versatile, capable of surviving in a range of environments and responding to the challenges posed by climate, predators, and competition for resources. The Earth, shaped by these biomes, taught lessons about balance, strategy, and resilience, and those who mastered both the shadows of the forest and the openness of the plains gained an advantage in the ongoing struggle for survival. In this ever-changing world, forests and grasslands were not simply landscapes. They were classrooms, arenas, and homes, shaping the lives, behaviors, and destinies of the humans who walked among them. 100,000 years ago, rivers, lakes, and wetlands were the lifeblood of the earth, shaping landscapes and sustaining life in ways both subtle and profound. Rivers carved valleys through rock and soil, their waters flowing relentlessly toward the oceans, carrying nutrients that nourished plants, attracted animals, and supported human survival. Along these waterways, fish swam in abundance, providing a reliable source of protein, while birds, mammals, and insects clustered near the banks, taking advantage of the water and the vegetation it supported. Wetlands formed along slower-moving sections of rivers and in low-lying areas, creating rich, fertile zones where life flourished in dense complexity. These aquatic environments were not just sources of sustenance, they were highways, migration corridors that allowed animals and humans to move safely across vast distances, following the rhythms of the seasons and the availability of food. Humans learned to read the signs of rivers and lakes, understanding when waters rose and fell, where fish gathered, and where floods might create fertile soil or dangerous currents. Early Homo sapiens discovered that water could guide them across unknown terrain, offering both nourishment and direction. Lakes became gathering points, places to camp temporarily while hunting nearby herds or gathering plants from the surrounding wetlands. The sounds of flowing water provided comfort and a sense of orientation, while the reflections of the sun on the surface revealed subtle shifts in the landscape. Water was not merely a resource, it was a teacher, revealing patterns in migration, weather, and animal behavior. Rivers also shaped ecosystems in profound ways. Their seasonal flooding deposited rich silt on surrounding lands, creating fertile areas for plants to thrive, which in turn attracted herbivores and the predators that followed them. Wetlands acted as buffers, storing excess water during rainy periods and providing refuge during dry spells. Humans, observing these patterns, adapted their hunting and gathering strategies to take advantage of these natural rhythms. They learned to fish with spears and traps, to collect waterfowl and eggs, and to forage for edible plants and roots along the shores. Each interaction with these aquatic environments built knowledge, guiding early humans in survival, navigation, and planning. The importance of rivers, lakes, and wetlands extended beyond the immediate needs of food and water. They shaped movement, trade, and social interaction among early groups, linking communities across the landscape. Humans observed animals using these corridors, learning to anticipate migrations and the seasonal abundance that followed. In this way, water became both a stage and a script, directing the lives of humans and animals alike. The rivers of life flowed continuously, connecting forests, grasslands, and plains, sustaining species, guiding movement, and providing the foundation for the intricate dance of survival that defined the Earth 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, the sky above dictated much of life on Earth. Celestial cycles, invisible yet powerful, controlled the rhythm of seasons, the advance and retreat of ice, and the intensity of sunlight reaching the planet's surface. The tilt of the Earth, its orbit around the Sun, and the slow wobble of its axis combined in complex patterns that governed long-term climate shifts. These cycles determined when glaciers advanced, covering vast expanses of land in ice, and when they retreated, releasing waters that reshaped coastlines and exposed new territories. The skies were not distant or abstract to early humans, they were an ever-present force, subtly influencing where plants grew, where animals migrated, and where survival was possible. Solar radiation, varying across the planet and over time, affected temperatures and weather patterns. In some regions, the sun's warmth allowed forests to thrive, while in others, its absence or weakening led to harsher winters and shorter growing seasons. Humans and animals alike had to anticipate these shifts, learning to read the signs in the sky. The movement of the sun, the phases of the moon, and the position of stars provided markers for time, signaling when to migrate, when to hunt, and when to gather seasonal foods. Understanding these cycles was not a matter of science in the modern sense, but of observation and intuition, passed down from one generation to the next as essential knowledge for survival. Volcanic activity added another layer of complexity, shaping climate and the landscapes themselves. Eruptions could blanket regions in ash, darkening skies for months and cooling temperatures temporarily. Rivers could be blocked, forests buried, and fertile soils created in the wake of destruction. Humans witnessed these events and adapted, moving to safer grounds, learning to exploit the newly enriched soil, and adjusting their timing for hunting and gathering. Each eruption was a reminder of the volatility of the world, a powerful lesson in resilience and foresight. Together, these celestial and geological forces created a dynamic, ever-changing environment. Ice ages expanded and contracted, altering habitats and forcing migrations. Solar intensity and seasonal shifts determined the abundance of plant and animal life. Volcanic eruptions reminded all living beings of the fragility of their existence and the need to remain vigilant. Early humans learned to read the sky not as a distant spectacle, but as a guide, a clock, and a map, informing decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. The sky above shaped the rhythms of the earth, and those who observed it carefully gained insight, foresight, and the ability to navigate a world in constant flux. 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, the world was a landscape of constant vigilance, where every step carried the potential for danger. Predators ruled the forests, grasslands, and tundra, their senses honed to detect the faintest movement, the slightest sound, or the hint of scent carried on the wind. Lions prowled the plains in coordinated groups, their strength and strategy making them formidable hunters. Hyenas roamed both day and night, their powerful jaws capable of crushing bone and their intelligence rivaling that of many predators. Bears, massive and unpredictable, patrolled forests and river valleys, omnivorous and strong, ready to defend their territory or seize an opportunity for a meal. Early humans existed in this world of apex predators, aware that survival depended on skill, knowledge, and constant attention to the surroundings. For humans, hunting was not merely a means of sustenance, it was a negotiation with danger. Every hunt required careful planning, awareness of terrain, and coordination within the group. Observing animal behavior became a necessity, understanding where herds moved, where predators lay in ambush, and how to use the landscape to gain an advantage. Humans learned to track footprints, to notice broken branches, and to interpret the sounds of distant calls, using this knowledge to avoid being prey while positioning themselves to succeed as hunters. Tools and fire became crucial allies. Spears, clubs, and later, more sophisticated implements allowed humans to challenge animals much larger and stronger than themselves, while fire provided protection, warmth, and the ability to cook food, making it safer and more nutritious. The relationship between predator and prey shaped not only daily survival but also human behavior, social structures, and cognition. Fear became a teacher, pushing humans to develop strategies, communicate effectively, and cooperate in ways essential for survival. Group hunting fostered coordination, shared knowledge, and trust, creating bonds that strengthened communities. Humans learned timing and patience, waiting for the right moment to strike, understanding that recklessness could mean injury or death. Prey animals, in turn, evolved alongside these humans, developing heightened senses, camouflage, and flight responses that kept the balance delicate and dynamic. Every encounter with a predator reinforced the need for adaptability. Early humans carried the lessons of these encounters in their memory, teaching their young to respect the power of lions, the cunning of hyenas, and the strength of bears. Life in this era demanded constant awareness, but it also fostered ingenuity, resilience, and cooperation. The world of predators and prey was a crucible in which human intelligence and social behavior were forged, shaping the instincts, strategies, and survival skills that would carry our species through the millennia. To live in this world was to live with both awe and caution, understanding that every day was a negotiation with forces greater than oneself, a delicate balance that defined existence 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, the invention and refinement of tools marked a profound turning point in human life. Early humans learned to transform stone, bone, and wood into implements that extended their abilities, allowing them to hunt more effectively, gather more efficiently, and manipulate their environment in ways previously impossible. Sharp flint points were carefully chipped to create spear tips, axes, and knives, each shaped to serve a specific purpose. Bones from hunted animals were sharpened into awls and needles, enabling the crafting of clothing, shelters, and other essential items. Wooden shafts and handles complemented these tools, providing leverage and strength, turning simple materials into versatile instruments that defined survival and innovation. These tools were not mere objects, they were extensions of human ingenuity. Hunting became more precise, allowing small groups to challenge larger prey safely and effectively. Spears could be thrown with greater accuracy, axes could fell small trees to create shelter or clear pathways, and knives allowed humans to process meat and hides with unprecedented efficiency. Each innovation built upon the last, creating a culture of experimentation and learning. Observation and repetition taught early humans which techniques worked best, and knowledge was shared within groups and across generations, forming the foundation of culture and education. Gathering also benefited from these innovations. Sharp-edged tools allowed humans to extract roots, tubers, and edible plants from the earth, to cut through tough stems, and to open nuts and shells that were previously inaccessible. Bone needles and awls enabled the creation of protective clothing, essential for surviving the icy winds of glacial landscapes and the wet cold of forested regions. Tools allowed humans to manipulate fire more effectively, controlling heat for cooking, warmth, and protection, which in turn influenced diet, health, and social organization. The crafting of tools encouraged planning, foresight, and dexterity. Humans learned to select materials carefully, to shape them with patience, and to anticipate their needs for the day, the season, or even the hunt ahead. This emphasis on strategy fostered collaboration, communication, and problem-solving skills. Groups became more coordinated, sharing tools, teaching methods, and techniques, which strengthened social bonds and created interdependent communities. The dawn of tools also reshaped the relationship between humans and the natural world. No longer passive observers, humans began to actively shape their surroundings, influencing the distribution of resources, the patterns of hunting, and the design of shelters. Each crafted item represented not only survival but also foresight, intelligence, and creativity. Tools became symbols of adaptability and resilience, allowing humans to thrive in diverse environments and to imagine possibilities beyond immediate need. The mastery of stone, bone, and wood was more than a technological leap. It was a cognitive revolution, one that transformed everyday life and set the stage for the future of human innovation 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, fire was both a friend and a foe, a force that demanded respect and careful management. For early humans, mastering fire transformed daily life in ways that extended far beyond warmth. The glow of flames provided light in the darkness, allowing activities to continue after the sun had set. Shadows danced on cave walls, giving early humans both comfort and a sense of mystery, as well as the ability to observe and plan. Fire offered protection, deterring predators and signaling presence to others across the landscape. A controlled blaze could drive animals away from campsites, creating a zone of safety where humans could rest, eat, and care for their young. Yet fire was not a simple tool. It required constant attention, careful preparation, and strategic thinking. Cooking with fire changed the relationship between humans and food. Raw meat could be transformed into tender, digestible nourishment, reducing the risk of disease and increasing caloric intake. Tubers, roots, and hard grains became edible, expanding the variety of the human diet. Fire allowed early humans to experiment with new foods, developing tastes and techniques that would influence culinary practices for millennia. The warmth of cooked meals encouraged social gatherings, fostering cooperation, storytelling, and the sharing of knowledge. Meals around a fire became moments of cultural exchange, where hunting strategies, tool-making techniques, and survival skills were discussed and transmitted to the next generation. Fire also reshaped the environment. Humans used it to clear areas for campsites, drive game during hunts, and manage vegetation to encourage the growth of useful plants. This strategic use of fire demonstrated foresight and planning, as one mismanaged flame could destroy shelter, supplies, or even entire settlements. Smoke signaled presence or danger, carried warnings across valleys, and sometimes altered the behavior of animals. Mastering fire required understanding wind, fuel sources, and timing, as well as the ability to maintain embers during the night or in times of scarcity. The dual nature of fire created both opportunity and risk. It could sustain life or endanger it. Early humans learned to respect its unpredictability, to balance its benefits with its dangers. Fire demanded vigilance, teaching responsibility and foresight. Those who mastered its use gained a crucial advantage, allowing them to thrive in cold climates, to extend their active hours, and to defend themselves against predators. Fire became a symbol of human ingenuity, a tool that amplified physical and social capabilities, and a force that reshaped the rhythms of life. In the hands of early humans, fire was a teacher, a protector, and a catalyst for survival, illuminating both the challenges and the possibilities of existence 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, shelter was both a necessity and a strategy for survival. Early humans sought protection from the elements, predators, and the unpredictability of a world shaped by ice, wind, and sudden storms. Caves offered natural refuge, their walls providing insulation from bitter cold and searing heat, while the entrances allowed humans to monitor approaching danger. Inside, families and small groups created spaces for rest, cooking, and social interaction, leaving behind evidence of their presence in the form of hearths, stone tools, and carvings. These shelters were more than simple structures. They were centers of safety, teaching, and planning, where knowledge of the surrounding landscape was shared and refined. Temporary huts and lean-tos made from branches, leaves, animal hides, and grasses offered flexibility. These constructions could be dismantled and moved as herds shifted, as rivers swelled, or as the ice advanced or receded. The design of these shelters reflected careful observation of materials and weather patterns. Thicker walls kept out the wind, elevated floors kept occupants dry, and smoke from small fires deterred insects and wild animals. Each structure was a product of experience, ingenuity, and the human instinct to adapt. Shelter was not merely a physical necessity, it shaped the rhythms of daily life, influencing how early humans gathered, hunted, and nurtured their young. Migration became an inseparable part of human survival. Seasonal movements allowed early humans to exploit the abundance of different regions while avoiding scarcity and danger. Rivers guided pathways, forests provided food and materials, and open plains revealed both opportunity and threat. Migrating was a calculated response to environmental change, requiring knowledge of terrain, animal behavior, and weather cycles. Groups learned to read the land, noting where berries ripened, where herds grazed, and where predators prowled. Decisions about when and where to move were often a matter of life or death, balancing the needs for food, safety, and warmth. The interplay between shelter and migration defined human resilience. Campsites were chosen with strategy, providing both immediate protection and access to future resources. Knowledge of multiple sites allowed groups to rotate between them, maintaining health and reducing the risk of overexploitation. The movement itself fostered cooperation, teaching navigation, coordination, and foresight. These patterns laid the foundation for social bonds, communication, and cultural traditions. Shelter and migration were not separate survival strategies but complementary approaches to life in a challenging world. The ability to create a safe space while remaining mobile, allowed early humans to thrive despite the threats around them. By observing, learning, and adapting to the landscape, they turned the environment into both a protector and a guide, shaping a relationship with the world that would endure for millennia. 100,000 years ago, the rhythm of movement and the search for shelter defined the daily existence of humans, teaching them the essential balance between safety, opportunity, and adaptability. 100,000 years ago, climate was both a sculptor and a challenge, shaping the lives of early humans in ways that demanded constant adaptation. The world was not stable. Ice sheets expanded and retreated across continents, creating vast glaciers in the north while leaving temperate corridors for life to flourish elsewhere. Storms could rise suddenly, bringing driving snow or torrential rain that transformed familiar landscapes into treacherous obstacles. Droughts would parch rivers and lakes, forcing humans and animals alike to migrate in search of water. Cold snaps descended with little warning, threatening the survival of those unprepared for sudden temperature drops. In this environment, every day required awareness, skill, and the ability to respond swiftly to the unexpected. Humans learned to read the signs of the land and sky. Cloud formations, wind patterns, and the behavior of animals offered clues about coming weather. Observation became a form of early science, a means of predicting danger and opportunity. Ice and snow influenced movement and hunting strategies. River valleys could freeze over, allowing passage to regions otherwise inaccessible, while sudden melts could flood plains, changing migration routes. Vegetation shifted with the seasons, and early humans had to track these changes to find edible plants, hunting grounds, and materials for shelter. Survival depended not only on physical strength but also on knowledge and foresight. These climate challenges drove innovation. Fire became essential not just for warmth but for maintaining health in cold, damp conditions. Clothing and shelter evolved to provide insulation and protection, with hides, furs, and layered constructions reducing exposure to the elements. Tools were adapted to suit specific environments, from cutting through frozen ground to processing tough vegetation during droughts. The necessity of planning for extreme conditions encouraged cooperation, communication, and strategic thinking within groups. Sharing resources, coordinating hunting parties, and organizing migrations were responses to the relentless pressures of a shifting climate. Failure was also a constant possibility. Groups who misjudged the severity of a storm or the duration of a cold snap could suffer starvation or exposure. Droughts could decimate populations, forcing relocation or resulting in the loss of lives. Yet these challenges also selected for resilience and ingenuity, shaping human behavior and social structures. Those who learned to anticipate, adapt, and cooperate survived, passing on knowledge to the next generation. The climate of 100,000 years ago was harsh and unpredictable, but it was also a teacher. It instilled patience, caution, and creativity, forcing early humans to understand the rhythms of the world around them. Ice, wind, drought, and storm were not merely obstacles. They were forces that molded the human spirit, shaping survival strategies and defining the delicate balance between vulnerability and mastery in a world ruled by change. 100,000 years ago, humans began to organize themselves into social structures that would form the foundation of complex societies. Small groups of individuals, often centered around family units, lived and traveled together, sharing resources, knowledge, and protection. Cooperation was essential for survival, whether in hunting large game, gathering seasonal plants, or defending against predators and rival groups. These early social networks were fluid yet purposeful, allowing humans to combine skills and strengths in ways that no individual could manage alone. Within these groups, relationships were negotiated through trust, communication, and shared experience, creating bonds that held communities together in a world of constant uncertainty. Conflict emerged naturally alongside cooperation. Competition for food, mates, and territory could spark disputes, and humans developed subtle mechanisms to manage tension. Leaders often arose not through force alone, but through expertise, wisdom, or skill in coordinating group activities. These early hierarchies were flexible, responding to the immediate needs of survival, Decision-making relied on consensus when possible, but guidance from those with knowledge or experience ensured that the group could act efficiently in moments of danger or opportunity. Social roles began to take shape, with responsibilities distributed according to age, strength, skill, and temperament, forming the early patterns of hierarchy and specialization. Family units were the core of these social networks. Parents, siblings, and extended relatives provided care, instruction, and protection, transmitting essential knowledge about food sources, tool-making, and navigation. Elders held particular importance as repositories of memory and experience, teaching the young about seasonal cycles, animal behavior, and strategies for avoiding danger. This exchange of knowledge strengthened cohesion, encouraged planning, and allowed groups to anticipate and respond to environmental challenges. Children learned by observation, imitation, and participation, gradually internalizing the skills and norms that would shape adulthood. Larger tribal networks began to form as small groups interacted with one another. Trade, shared hunting territories, and temporary alliances created opportunities for cooperation beyond immediate kin. Social bonds were reinforced through rituals, shared meals, and collaborative activities, strengthening trust between groups and enabling coordinated action when necessary. These networks laid the groundwork for more formal systems of governance, law, and mutual support, even in a world defined by scarcity and risk. The emergence of social structures 100,000 years ago marked a pivotal step in human evolution. Cooperation and conflict, hierarchy and flexibility, knowledge and memory all converged to create resilient communities capable of surviving in harsh and unpredictable environments. The patterns established during this time would echo through millennia, influencing human behavior, cultural development, and the very ways in which societies functioned. Early humans learned that survival was not just a matter of skill or strength, but also of connection, communication, and the ability to navigate the complex web of relationships that bound them together. 100,000 years ago, communication was a lifeline, a crucial tool for survival in a world full of uncertainty and danger. Early humans relied on a combination of signs, sounds, and gestures to share information quickly and efficiently. A sharp cry could signal the approach of a predator, while a series of clicks or whistles might guide hunting parties through dense forests or across open plains. These early forms of communication were immediate and practical, honed by necessity, yet they laid the groundwork for something far more profound: the emergence of language. Gestures and body language were often the first elements of communication. A raised arm, a pointing finger, or the direction of a glance could convey meaning without a single sound. These signals were interpreted in context, allowing group members to coordinate movement, warn of danger, or indicate resources such as water or food. Repetition and consistency strengthened understanding as individuals learned to associate specific movements with outcomes or actions. This nonverbal language was complemented by vocalizations, from simple grunts to melodic calls, which could carry across distances and reach more members of a group than gestures alone. Over time, these sounds and gestures became more structured, patterns emerged, and combinations of noises or movements took on shared meaning. Humans began to develop a system of symbols, a way to represent objects, actions, and concepts in a form that others could recognize and respond to. This evolution of communication allowed groups to coordinate more complex activities, such as strategic hunting, gathering expeditions, or the construction of temporary shelters. It enabled knowledge to be transmitted not just through demonstration, but through explanation, instruction, and story. Storytelling became one of the most powerful tools in early human communication. Around the fire, after a day of hunting or traveling, elders could recount experiences, describing encounters with predators, migrations of herds, or the discovery of edible plants. These stories were more than entertainment. They were a repository of collective wisdom, teaching survival skills, caution, and social norms. Myths and narratives helped groups make sense of natural events, from the changing seasons to volcanic eruptions or unusual animal behavior. By embedding practical knowledge within memorable stories, early humans ensured that crucial lessons were passed from one generation to the next. Warning calls and alarm systems became increasingly sophisticated. Specific sounds were associated with specific dangers, whether a stalking predator, a sudden storm, or the movement of rival groups. These vocal signals required attention, rapid interpretation, and coordinated response, enhancing the group's overall survival. The refinement of such signals demanded memory, focus, and social learning, further strengthening cognitive abilities and cooperation. Language and communication also fostered social cohesion. Shared signals, words, and stories created a sense of belonging and identity within a group. They allowed humans to negotiate, mediate conflicts, and plan collective action. Decisions about where to move, what to hunt, or when to rest were discussed, not simply acted upon instinctively. This ability to share abstract ideas, intentions, and observations marked a turning point in human evolution, expanding the boundaries of thought and collaboration. The foundations of language 100,000 years ago were subtle yet profound. They transformed survival from a matter of individual skill into a collective endeavor. Through signs, sounds, gestures, and stories, early humans created a bridge between experience and memory, between observation and understanding. Language became both a practical tool and a vessel for culture, enabling knowledge to endure across generations and shaping the trajectory of human society in ways that would echo through tens of thousands of years. 100,000 years ago, the human mind began to reach beyond immediate survival, venturing into the realm of imagination and expression. The first sparks of artistic thought emerged in subtle but profound ways, revealing an awareness of the world that was both practical and symbolic. Cave walls, rock shelters, and even the surfaces of everyday tools became canvases for early humans to record not just events, but ideas, emotions, and concepts that transcended the purely functional. These early artistic gestures were more than decoration. They represented the birth of culture, identity, and the capacity to think abstractly. Cave paintings, etched and painted with natural pigments, offered glimpses into the lives and thoughts of these early humans. Depictions of animals, often exaggerated or stylized, suggest not only observation but interpretation. Horses, bison, mammoths, and deer were rendered with attention to movement, posture, and detail, reflecting an understanding of anatomy and behavior. These images may have served multiple purposes, as hunting aids, teaching tools, or even ritual expressions intended to influence the unseen forces of the world. The act of creating such art required planning, patience, and collaboration, and it fostered a shared language of symbols within groups. Engravings on bones, stones, and antlers further demonstrate the development of symbolic thinking. Patterns of lines, dots, and shapes appear to be deliberate rather than accidental, hinting at a desire to communicate meaning, mark territory, or record events. These carvings suggest that early humans were capable of abstraction, of seeing patterns in nature and translating them into visual representations. The ability to externalize thought in this way marks a profound cognitive shift, enabling humans to manipulate ideas in ways that were not tied solely to immediate survival. Decorations on tools and personal items indicate that early humans were beginning to consider aesthetics alongside utility. Beads, pendants, and painted objects served as markers of identity, status, or group affiliation. These small, deliberate choices show a growing concern with appearance, symbolism, and social connection. They reflect an understanding that objects could carry meaning beyond their function, and that visual communication could reinforce relationships, status, or shared beliefs. The interplay between art and utility reveals a mind capable of both imagination and pragmatism, merging creativity with everyday life. Artistic expression also reinforced memory and learning. Images could record the movement of animals, seasonal changes, or significant events, preserving knowledge for others in the group and for future generations. The shared creation of art strengthened bonds, encouraging cooperation, conversation, and teaching. Storytelling, combined with visual representation, allowed humans to encode complex information in ways that could be remembered and transmitted with clarity. The beginnings of symbolic thought 100,000 years ago reflect a leap in human consciousness. By leaving marks on walls, tools, and objects, early humans began to explore identity, imagination, and the unseen connections between people and their world. Art became a bridge between the material and the conceptual, the practical and the abstract. It revealed a mind capable of creativity, reflection, and foresight, laying the foundation for the rich cultural tapestry that would define human history for tens of thousands of years to come. 100,000 years ago, the landscape of the world was shared by multiple human species, each adapting to the challenges of survival in their own ways. Homo sapiens were not alone, and their journey unfolded alongside that of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other hominins whose lives were intertwined with the same harsh climates, the same fluctuating resources, and the same predators. Encounters between these species were inevitable, and they played a profound role in shaping the course of human evolution, both biologically and culturally. Neanderthals, with their robust frames and remarkable resilience to cold, inhabited much of Europe and Western Asia. They were skilled hunters, capable of taking down large prey with coordinated strategies, and they had developed their own set of tools, shelters, and social structures. Denisovans, though less understood, left traces of their existence in Asia, particularly through genetic evidence, suggesting they adapted to high-altitude and extreme environments with equal ingenuity. The presence of Homo sapiens in regions already occupied by these species created a dynamic of both competition and cooperation, a complex interaction that shaped the survival strategies of all involved. Competition for resources would have been immediate and tangible. Food, water, and shelter were finite, and the arrival of new groups could put pressure on existing populations. Evidence of overlapping territories suggests that early humans had to navigate not only the challenges of nature but also the presence of other hominins. Conflicts may have arisen, and individuals would have learned to defend, retreat, or negotiate in response. The landscapes were arenas of adaptation, where strategy, strength, and intelligence determined who thrived and who perished. Yet the story was not solely one of rivalry. Genetic evidence reveals that interbreeding occurred between Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, leaving a legacy in the DNA of modern humans. These encounters were not always violent. They included cooperation, exchange, and shared knowledge. Early humans may have learned survival techniques, hunting strategies, and tool-making skills from their neighbors, integrating insights that enhanced their own adaptability. The mingling of genes introduced new traits, some aiding immunity, others enhancing physical or cognitive abilities, and these exchanges subtly guided the evolutionary path of our species. Cultural interactions likely accompanied these genetic connections. Artifacts, symbolic objects, and similarities in tool design suggest that communication and observation between species influenced the spread of ideas. Techniques for making tools, for preparing food, or for managing fire could have crossed species boundaries, enriching each community's capacity to survive. These early exchanges hint at a complex social awareness, a recognition of others not as mere threats, but as sources of knowledge, opportunity, and even kinship in some cases. The encounters between Homo sapiens and other hominins were therefore a defining element of our history. They tested boundaries, forced adaptation, and fostered innovation. Competition drove ingenuity, while cooperation and gene flow strengthened resilience. In this crucible of interaction, humans learned not only how to survive, but how to integrate, adapt, and expand, shaping a future where the legacies of these encounters would persist in both our biology and our culture. These relationships were subtle yet transformative, leaving traces that endure in every person alive today, a reminder that our journey was never solitary, but shared with those who walked the world alongside us. 100,000 years ago, water was both a giver and a taker of life. Glacial melt, rivers, and ice sheets shaped the land in profound ways, carving valleys, depositing sediments, and redirecting the flow of ecosystems. These forces created ever-changing landscapes, demanding that early humans remain vigilant, adaptable, and mobile. Water dictated where people could settle, where animals could be hunted, and where plants could be gathered, becoming a central actor in the survival story of our species. The advance and retreat of ice sheets transformed coastlines, exposing new land bridges and closing off others. Vast expanses of Europe and North America were buried under kilometers of ice, while other regions revealed previously submerged plains. These shifting territories forced human populations to follow the ebb and flow of habitable land. Migration was not simply a choice but a necessity, and those who could read the cues of melting ice and swelling rivers were more likely to survive and thrive. Rivers served as highways and lifelines, channels along which humans could travel, hunt, and trade. The presence of fresh water attracted game and provided a steady source of hydration and plant foods. Seasonal floods deposited nutrient-rich soils, encouraging the growth of edible plants and supporting the prey animals that relied on these environments. Wetlands, lakes, and riverbanks became hubs of activity, where humans observed patterns, developed tools for fishing, and learned to exploit the abundance around them. These water-rich zones were dynamic, offering opportunities but also challenges, requiring careful planning, knowledge of seasonal cycles, and cooperation within groups. Glacial meltwater added both urgency and opportunity. As ice sheets warmed and receded, rivers swelled and new lakes formed, reshaping entire regions within decades or even years. Early humans had to anticipate these changes, moving ahead of rising waters or adapting to the sudden availability of new resources. The meltwaters carried minerals, creating fertile grounds and new fishing opportunities, but they could also sweep away camps, destroy food caches, or trap the unwary in treacherous terrain. Survival depended on attentiveness, flexibility, and an intimate understanding of the rhythms of water and ice. Ice itself played a dual role, as both barrier and conduit. Thick glaciers impeded movement, forcing humans to take detours and develop strategies to cross or circumvent obstacles. At the same time, frozen seas and snow-covered plains occasionally created temporary pathways, enabling migrations across regions that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Knowledge of these seasonal windows was critical, passed down through observation, teaching, and oral tradition. The interplay of solid and liquid water shaped routes of travel, patterns of settlement, and even the distribution of species, creating corridors and refuges that structured ecosystems for millennia. The role of water and ice extended beyond the immediate, influencing climate, vegetation, and animal populations. Rivers carved valleys where forests could take root, wetlands sustained diverse species, and glacial melt regulated global temperatures. Humans, attuned to these cycles, learned to navigate the changing world, tracking herds, predicting floods, and using waterways to connect with distant communities. These interactions forged resilience and ingenuity, allowing early humans not only to survive but to expand across continents. Water and ice were agents of transformation, shaping landscapes, ecosystems, and human behavior in ways that would echo across tens of thousands of years, leaving an indelible mark on the story of our species. 100,000 years ago, survival was a constant negotiation with the forces of nature, and the margins between life and death were narrow. Early humans faced a world filled with both opportunity and peril, a landscape where megafauna roamed, predators stalked, and resources fluctuated with the seasons. Each day demanded vigilance, skill, and cooperation, for the challenges were relentless and often unpredictable. Life depended on the ability to adapt quickly, to read the environment, and to act decisively, for the consequences of error could be fatal. Megafauna dominated the land, shaping ecosystems and influencing human behavior. Woolly mammoths, giant bison, saber-toothed cats, and enormous ground sloths moved through forests, grasslands, and tundra, their presence both a threat and a potential source of sustenance. Humans learned to observe their patterns, to track herds over long distances, and to exploit their behaviors for hunting. Yet the same animals could be dangerous, their size and strength capable of crushing or goring a hunter in moments. The struggle for survival was not merely a battle against hunger but a constant negotiation with creatures far larger and stronger than any human. Extinction was never far from the horizon. Some species disappeared due to climate shifts, habitat loss, or the relentless pressure of hunting. As glaciers advanced and retreated, landscapes transformed, cutting off migratory routes and shrinking food sources. Human predation, combined with environmental change, contributed to the gradual disappearance of many large animals. Each extinction had cascading effects, altering ecosystems, forcing humans to adjust their diets, change hunting strategies, and sometimes migrate to new regions to find reliable sources of food. Survival required flexibility and foresight, an understanding that what worked one season might fail the next. Disease, accidents, and scarcity added layers of challenge. Injuries from hunting, falls, or encounters with predators could be deadly, especially when medical knowledge was limited to observation and improvisation. Illness spread rapidly in groups living close together, and exposure to the elements could quickly turn a mild condition into a fatal one. Scarcity of food or water forced difficult choices, creating periods of famine that tested the resilience of individuals and communities alike. The early human journey was defined by these pressures, shaping not only daily behavior but long-term evolution. Adaptation emerged as the key to persistence. Those who could learn, innovate, and cooperate increased their chances of survival. Toolmaking, fire use, coordinated hunting, and the careful selection of habitats were not just strategies but lifelines. Knowledge passed from generation to generation allowed humans to anticipate danger, exploit opportunities, and navigate a world of constant change. Yet, even with skill and intelligence, survival was never guaranteed, and extinction remained an ever-present possibility, shaping the evolutionary trajectory of species, including our own. The struggle for life was relentless, and extinction was a constant companion. Through it all, humans endured, evolving physically, cognitively, and culturally in response to the pressures of their environment. Megafauna disappeared, climates shifted, and challenges multiplied, but the lessons learned in these crucibles of survival became the foundation for future generations. Adaptation, ingenuity, and resilience ensured that humans persisted, leaving an indelible mark on the planet and securing a place in the story of life that continues to unfold today. 100,000 years ago, the world was harsh, vast, and unyielding, yet it was also a world full of lessons, opportunities, and the quiet beginnings of what would become the story of humanity. The Ice Age shaped landscapes, sculpted ecosystems, and forced every living creature to adapt or perish. Early humans navigated this environment with a combination of intelligence, observation, and sheer perseverance. They learned to read the signs of the wind, the movements of animals, the changing patterns of seasons, and the subtle shifts in terrain that could mean life or death. Through these challenges, they laid the foundations for everything that would follow, and their legacy continues to resonate in the very nature of modern Homo sapiens. The endurance of these early humans was remarkable. They faced predators larger and more dangerous than themselves, traveled across unfamiliar lands in search of food and shelter, and confronted climate extremes that would overwhelm many species. Their survival was not simply a matter of strength, but of learning, cooperation, and adaptation. Fire became a tool of warmth and protection. Stone and bone shaped into tools became extensions of the human hand, and the knowledge of the landscape and its inhabitants was stored in memory and passed from one generation to the next. Through these strategies, humans were not merely surviving, they were building a foundation of resilience that would define the species for millennia. The environment itself played a critical role in shaping human development. Glaciers advanced and retreated, altering rivers, exposing land bridges, and shifting the distribution of plants and animals. Forests, grasslands, and wetlands demanded flexibility and understanding. Resources were never guaranteed, and scarcity forced creativity, cooperation, and innovation. Early humans learned not only to adapt to what existed, but also to anticipate and prepare for what might come. They discovered patterns in the chaos of nature, and in doing so, they began to exert a subtle influence on the world around them. Encounters with other hominins, competition for resources, and the pressure of survival fostered both cooperation and conflict. These interactions were complex, shaping genetic diversity and cultural exchange. Humans learned to communicate, to warn, to teach, and to share knowledge about the environment, predators, and survival strategies. Symbolic thought began to emerge through art, ritual, and expression, hinting at the cognitive and cultural evolution that would define our species. Every tool crafted, every fire tended, every journey undertaken contributed to the collective experience that allowed humans to endure against staggering odds. The legacy of this era is profound. The lessons of resilience, adaptation, and ingenuity are etched into the human story. The Ice Age was not merely a backdrop of hardship, it was a crucible in which the skills, intelligence, and social bonds that define humanity were forged. From these early experiences, modern humans inherited the capacity to observe, innovate, and cooperate in ways that would allow the species to thrive in environments far removed from those of our ancestors. We carry in our genes, in our cognition, and in our culture the echoes of these challenges, reminders that survival is rarely about brute force alone. It is about learning, adapting, and persisting in a world that is always in motion. Looking back across 100,000 years, we see that the story of early humans is not simply one of struggle, but of triumph through understanding and flexibility. It is a story that teaches us about endurance, about the power of cooperation, and about the profound connection between humans and the environment. The Ice Age shaped us as much as we shaped it, leaving a legacy of resilience and adaptability that continues to guide the journey of Homo sapiens to this day.